He saw a struggling mom by the roadside, baby in her arms, flat tire, no one stopping. He pulled over, fixed the car, bought her food, left his only blanket, and drove off without saying his name. 3 days later, at 6 a.m., a general knocked. On his door, the sun was already beginning to dip when Jack Harper spotted the car. A busted old Ford sedan, listing on its axle, front tire completely shredded. The woman next to it looked more like a shadow than a person. Hair matted to her face with sweat, a baby crying against her chest, and eyes darting with panic at every vehicle that sped past without slowing down. He didn't think. He just pulled over. She didn't ask for help. She didn't have to. The flat spoke for itself. So did the way her hands trembled as she tried to hush her baby, eyes glassy. With tears, she refused to let fall. Jack changed the tire in silence, then walked across the highway to the gas station, bought her a sandwich, 2 bottles of water, a can of formula. She tried to thank him, but he just smiled faintly, took the blanket from his back seat, the only one he had, and tucked it around the baby before walking away. He never gave his name, never asked hers. 3 days later, the knock came just after dawn. He opened the door to a man in full military dress, boots polished like mirrors, posture stiff as a board, a scar slicing clean through his left eyebrow. Behind him, an unmarked black SUV idled at the curb. The general didn't smile, didn't introduce himself. He simply said, "You need to come with me. It's about the woman you helped." Jack Harper lived like the world had already ended. He rented a faded cabin on the edge of Red Bluff, a quiet Northern California town with more pickup trucks than people. His neighbors didn't know much about him other than he paid cash, kept to himself, and always nodded politely at the post office. Some thought he was ex-military, others assumed ex-something worse. Either way, no one asked. His days followed, a rhythm he didn't like but didn't fight. Up at 5, black coffee, a long walk into town. Sometimes he'd read the paper on the bench outside Willer's Diner, listening to old men argue politics while pretending not to listen. Other times, he just wandered the back roads, like he was searching for something he'd lost decades ago. He didn't keep pictures, no family photos, no keepsakes, just a well-worn duffel bag, a stack of paperbacks with broken spines, and a radio that barely picked up anything but static. There was a time when Jack had been somebody. A rank, a title, medals he'd never wear. But that part of him was packed away, same as the uniforms. Now he lived like a man who'd been stripped of purpose and learned to survive on what little remained. He didn't speak of the war. Any of them. What people didn't see were the scars, the kind that didn't show up on skin, the sleepless nights, the way he still double-checked door locks, or how he sometimes startled at fireworks only to pretend he hadn't. He carried a quiet, heavy grief, the kind you don't cry out. You carry it in your bones, in the stiffness of your walk, in the way you look at the world like it owes you nothing, and yet, under all that, Jack still had a compass, something buried but unbroken. It's what made him pull over that day. He hadn't planned to stop, but the moment he saw her, barefoot on the gravel shoulder, clutching that crying baby with cars flying past like she didn't exist, something inside him moved. That something, he thought, had long died. Apparently not. He didn't do it for thanks, didn't think he'd see her again. He certainly didn't expect her to know who he was, which is why, 3 days later, when a man with medals on his chest and steel in his voice appeared on his porch, Jack felt something he hadn't in a long time. Not fear, not even confusion, but the sharp, familiar sense that life had just changed course, and he was about to be drafted into something far bigger than he'd ever intended. The general didn't ask permission. He simply stepped forward, handed Jack a sealed file and said, "She wasn't who you thought she was, and now they know who you are too." It was late afternoon when Jack first saw her, mile marker 47, a sun-beaten stretch of Highway 36 with little more than dust and empty road on either side. The air was thick with that dry California heat that clings to your skin like a second layer, and everything shimmered just slightly, like the world couldn't decide whether to be real or not. She stood next to the car, her back to traffic. One arm trying to rock the baby strapped to her chest, while the other fiddled helplessly with a rusted jack that wouldn't lift. The tire was beyond flat, shredded, metal rim biting into the asphalt. There were diapers in the front seat, a cracked baby bottle on the dash. And when she turned to look as Jack's truck slowed, he saw it, the sheer panic behind her, eyes masked by the kind of stubbornness only desperation can produce. She didn't wave him down, didn't even move toward the truck. But Jack pulled over anyway. The truck door creaked as he stepped out, worn boots hitting the gravel. He didn't say much, just a quiet, "You need a hand?" as he approached. She didn't answer right away, just tightened her arms around the baby and gave the smallest nod. He didn't ask questions, didn't ask where she was headed or how long she'd been stuck, just set to work. The tools in his truck were old but reliable, and within 20 minutes the spare was on, the old tire tossed in the back seat like yesterday's mistake. Inside the car, the baby whimpered, eyes red from crying too long. Jack handed her a bottle of water, then quietly crossed the road and came back with a plastic bag from the station across the highway, turkey sandwich, 2 apple juices, and a canister of baby formula that cost more than he'd wanted to spend. But he handed it over without a word. She looked at him like she wanted to cry and thank him all at once. Instead, she asked, voice barely audible, "Why are you helping me?" Jack shrugged. "Someone helped me once." Before she could say more, he opened the truck door, reached in, and pulled out his old army-issue blanket, frayed at the edges but clean. He wrapped it gently around the sleeping baby. "You'll need this more than I will," he said. Then he turned, got in his truck, and drove away. No name, no goodbyes. As he checked the rearview mirror, he saw her still standing there, staring after him. Something about her posture, the way she clutched the blanket to her chest, stayed with him long after the road had curved and she was gone from sight. And what he couldn't shake, even hours later, was this quiet, gnawing thought. That didn't make sense at the time. She hadn't seemed surprised that someone stopped. She had seemed surprised it was him. The knock came before the sun. 3 sharp raps, not the kind of knock from a neighbor borrowing sugar or a delivery left too early. No, this was precise, measured, intentional. Jack swung his legs over the side of the bed, already alert, already reaching for the Glock he kept under the nightstand out of habit more than necessity. Red Bluff didn't get much trouble, but this didn't feel like trouble in the usual sense. When he opened the door, the man standing on the porch could have walked straight out of a recruitment poster. Broad-shouldered, clean-shaven uniform, pressed to the inch. A row of ribbons caught the early light, and his eyes were the kind you don't look into unless you're ready to tell the truth. "Mr. Harper?" the man asked, voice like gravel beneath polished boots. "Depends whose." Asking, the man pulled a small leather case from his coat, military credentials. The kind Jack hadn't seen in years. The kind you don't fake. "Major General Easton, I'm here on direct orders." Jack frowned. "Retired, General. Long retired." "You're not being recalled," Easton said. "Not officially." He stepped back, motioning to the black SUV idling quietly at the curb. "No plates, tinted windows. It's about the woman you helped 3 days ago. Mile 47. Something shifted in Jack's gut. "Is she okay?" The general didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his coat and pulled out a sealed manila folder. Thick, heavy. "She wasn't who you thought she was," he said, "and unfortunately, she knew exactly who you were." Jack took the folder, eyes scanning the surface. No markings, no stamps. Just one word written by hand, Lena. He hadn't asked her name. Now it was being handed to him like a sealed confession. Easton spoke again, voice lower this time. "We need to talk. Not here. Jack glanced toward the SUV, his jaw clenched. "You dragging me back in?" "No," Easton said. "I'm giving you the choice to walk away, but once you open that file, Jack..." He paused, the words catching, like they cost him something. "You won't want to." Jack didn't move. For the first time in a long time, he felt the world tilting beneath him. That dusty road, that quiet gesture, the simple decision to help, all of it now felt like the first step on a path he hadn't chosen, but couldn't ignore. So he opened the folder, and in the very first photo, a grainy image taken from a satellite feed was the woman he'd helped, only this time she wasn't holding a baby. She was holding a key card, standing outside a door marked Level 6, Secure Access Only. The SUV's interior smelled like leather and cold steel. No music, no idle chatter, just the rhythmic hum of tires on pavement and the occasional rustle of paper as Jack flipped through the folder. Page after page, photo after photo. Surveillance. Shots, classified briefings, and one redacted memo after another, all circling back to one name, Lena Marin. "She was NSA?" Jack finally asked, eyes still scanning. "Not field. Her posture's too rigid." "Correct," Easton said, not bothering to look over. "Cyber operations. Threat analysis. She wasn't meant to be anywhere near the kind of heat she walked into. And yet she was." Easton didn't respond right away. She went dark 2 weeks ago, took her infant son and vanished. "We assumed she'd been compromised or killed." Jack shook his head slowly. "She didn't vanish. She broke down on the side of a highway." Easton gave a humorless chuckle. "Nothing Lena Marin does is by accident." They pulled into a long, narrow driveway leading up to a weather-worn facility buried behind a chain of evergreens. The sign on the gate read Cedar Creek Research Facility, but Jack could tell, even from the way the guards stood at attention, that this was federal, deeply federal. Inside, they walked through 2 checkpoints before entering a low-lit control room. A digital map pulsed on the far wall. Dots blinked, coordinates shifted. Jack's stomach tightened. "She was carrying something," Easton said. "Not just the kid. A data capsule, military-grade, encrypted. When she broke protocol and disappeared, we assumed it was stolen. But last night," he motioned to a screen. Grainy footage flickered. Lena slipping through a service corridor, cradling the child with one arm, her other hand shoving a drive into a storage locker behind a loose panel. "She left it behind," Easton continued. "And now we know why." Jack leaned in. There, zoomed into the freeze frame, was the locker. And next to it, etched into the steel with something sharp, were the numbers 47, 134, 120.688. A coordinate. Not random. Jack's pulse quickened. "That's near Rimrock, high desert, no man's land." Easton nodded. "She wanted someone to find it. Someone she trusted." Jack turned toward him. "Why me?" Easton didn't blink. "Because the people she was running from used to sit in the same rooms we did. And because her file lists you as her fallback." Jack's breath caught. "I never met her before that night." "Maybe not formally," Easton said. "But you trained the man she was trying to expose." Jack stared at him. Something cold settled in his chest. "Who?" Easton's gaze hardened. "Nathaniel Rourke." Jack froze. That name didn't belong here. Not in this decade, not in this reality. "Rourke is dead." Easton's voice dropped. "No, Jack. He's very much alive." Jack stared at the general, heart thudding so loud it nearly drowned out the hum of the overhead lights. He hadn't heard that name in over a decade. Nathaniel Rourke wasn't just a ghost from the past. He was the kind of ghost that left bodies behind. "That's impossible," Jack said, voice low. "Rourke died in Kandahar. I saw the file. I read the damn report." Easton nodded slowly, then pulled another file from the case beside him. This one was thinner, older, yellowing at the edges. He opened it and laid it across the metal table. Between them, Inside was a photo, not military issue, but grainy, covert. A man in a long coat stepping out of a warehouse in Istanbul just 8 months ago. The beard was thicker, hair longer, but the posture, the walk. Jack leaned closer. "That's him." And Lena knew, Easton said. She was embedded at Site Zero, a program no one was supposed to touch until she discovered Rourke's signature in a security breach. Someone used his old clearance. From inside, Jack's thoughts spun. So she took the files and ran. She took the proof, Easton corrected, because she knew if she stayed, she wouldn't survive long enough to hand it over. And now, he gestured toward the map behind them. Rourke's name has reappeared in the network. Someone's activating old sleeper routes. We believe Lena found what he's after and stashed it near those coordinates. Jack closed the file, fingers clenched. He remembered Rourke, charismatic, brilliant, but with a look in his eye like he was always 5 steps ahead. A man who loved power more than country, the kind of soldier you trained hard and kept a leash on harder, except someone had cut that leash and Lena had stepped straight into the fallout. "She has a baby," Jack muttered. "Rourke's?" Easton paused. "We don't know, but she's the only one who can confirm what's on that drive." Jack sat back, running a hand down his face. "And I'm supposed to what? Go dig it up? Finish the job the agency couldn't?" "No," Easton said. "We need you to find her, quietly, before he does." Jack met his eyes. "If Rourke's back, this isn't just about one woman or one file." "It never was," the general said. "This is about everything we buried coming back to surface, and you, Jack, you're the only one not on his payroll." A heavy silence fell. Jack looked down at the old photograph. Rourke's face stared back, half-shadowed, but unmistakably alive, and in that moment, Jack understood something with bone-deep certainty. He hadn't stopped on that road by accident. Lena hadn't been running. She had been leading someone straight to him. Fort Haines wasn't on any current maps. Once a Cold War research base nestled in the Columbia River Gorge, it had been decommissioned in the late 90s. Or so the paperwork claimed. Jack knew better. Bases like Haines didn't close. They went quiet. The drive was long and silent, broken only by the occasional military checkpoint Easton cleared with a glance. Jack said little, reviewing the decoded coordinates from Lena's file. They didn't point to the base directly, but to a dry ravine just beyond its northern fence. That was the real entrance. When they reached the rusted gate, Easton used an old key card. The pad beeped, a dull, lifeless tone. The gate creaked open anyway. Inside, the base felt like a forgotten ruin. Moss-covered concrete, broken security lights, chain-link fencing curled inward like it had tried to protect something and failed. But underneath, Jack felt it. The hum of still active power lines, the faint warmth of a grid that hadn't quite died. This place was shut down after Project Wavelength. Easton muttered as they walked. Only a few of us had clearance. Rourke was one, Jack nodded. He remembered Wavelength, a neural mapping initiative meant to enhance reflex response in field operatives. It had been shut down after a test subject flatlined during a simulated ambush, or so they'd been told. As they entered the main bunker, the walls changed. Sterile white panels, emergency lighting still intact. Easton led him down a narrow stairwell, past sealed doors and old biometric locks that blinked red at their presence. They stopped outside a storage vault, number stenciled in faded black, C19. "This is where she pulled it from," Easton said. "The original data drive, everything Lena smuggled out, started here." Jack stepped inside. Dust choked the air, rows of sealed cabinets, broken equipment, a single computer terminal flashing a prompt, untouched for years. He approached. A nearby drawer pried it open. Inside were files, real ones, not digital. Handwritten notes, test logs, internal memos with phrases that chilled him, subject drift, a core override unstable, behavioral predictability, compromised. Jack's breath slowed. He knew what this was. They hadn't just tried to enhance soldier performance. They'd tried to control it. Jesus, he whispered. They weren't building better soldiers. They were building triggers. Easton stood silent. Jack turned to him. Rourke wasn't a subject. He was a prototype. And Lena found the failsafe, Easton said. Something buried deep in the early phase logs. Something we thought was deleted. Whatever she took from here, it's what he needs to finish what he started. Jack looked around the bunker. This wasn't a facility. It was a graveyard. For ethics, for accountability, for everything they were supposed to protect. He closed the drawer. His voice was steady now. She didn't run from him. She ran from us. Easton's expression didn't change. No, Jack, she ran to you. The knock this time was softer, hesitant, almost human. Jack opened the door without reaching for a weapon. He already knew who it was. Lena stood on the porch, same dark hoodie from the roadside, though now stained with dried mud and a rip at the hem. Her hair was pulled back hastily. The baby, her baby, was asleep against her chest. Small hands curled around the edge of Jack's old blanket. She looked up, and for a moment neither of them spoke. I didn't know where else to go, she finally whispered. Jack stepped aside. She moved cautiously, shoulders tense, like she was waiting for the room to explode. Jack poured 2 mugs of coffee, the real kind, strong and dark, and slid one across the table. Why me? He asked. Lena didn't answer right away. She looked down at the baby. Because Rourke trusted you, and because I needed someone who wouldn't be part of all this. Jack leaned forward. He's alive, Lena, and he's moving. Her jaw tightened. I know. He's been looking for me since I left the base. You were his analyst. No, she said softly. I was his wife. The words hit harder than Jack expected. I didn't know at first. His real identity was buried under a dozen aliases. When I found out who he was, what he was planning, I ran. Took the baby. Took the files. Jack's eyes drifted to the child. His son? Lena hesitated. He thinks so. Jack nodded slowly, the weight of it all sinking in. What's on the drive? She reached into her coat, pulling out a small capsule no bigger than a car key. Everything. Wavelengths evolution, the behavioral override tech, the list of active implants. He's already testing the next phase. Not on soldiers, Jack. On civilians. Jack stood. Where? Rimrock, she said. An old relay. Station. He's broadcasting signal tests. That's what those coordinates lead to. It's not just a hiding place, it's a control point. Jack ran a hand over his face. The war he'd walked away from hadn't ended. It had just gone underground. You should have told me sooner, he said. I tried, she said. Leaving the drive, leaving the coordinates. I didn't know if you'd even remember who you were anymore. Jack's voice was quiet but firm. I remember. She looked at him then, not with fear, but with something closer to hope. Then help me finish this, she said, before he finds us. Outside, a gust of wind rattled the porch, and, from the distance, the low, slow rumble of a car engine, one that didn't belong to anyone in Red Bluff, crept down the road like a storm waiting to break. The SUV parked 2 houses down, engine idling, no lights, no plates. Jack watched from the window, shoulders squared, heart calm in that razor-sharp way only men trained for war understood. Lena stood behind him, rocking the baby gently, though her hands trembled. They found us, she whispered. No, Jack said. They found me. He walked to the back room, the one nobody but him ever entered, and opened the floor panel. Beneath it, a steel case, locked and sealed since the day he left active duty. Inside were tools of a life he never wanted to touch again. He chose 2 things, the Sig Sauer and the burner phone, dialed a number. It rang twice. Go ahead, came Easton's voice. They're here, Jack said. 3 men, government issue, not your people. I want confirmation. Are you still backing me? A pause. Then, "Jack, listen carefully. Those men don't work for us. We intercepted chatter. Rourke sent them. He's in Rimrock. He knows she's with you." Jack hung up. In the living room, Lena had already strapped the baby into the travel carrier. "You're not staying here," Jack said. "You'll take the canyon trail behind the house. There's an old ranger station 10 miles up, off-grid. No signal. I'll find you." "And you?" she asked. "I'll give them what they came for." Lena's eyes welled, but she blinked. Fast. No time for tears. "Jack, you don't owe me this." He looked at her, really looked at her, the sharp intelligence in her eyes. The pain of someone who'd been used and discarded by the very machine she'd tried to serve. "You're wrong," he said. "I owe it to the part of me that forgot people like you existed." She nodded, one slow, deliberate motion. Then she vanished out the back, boots crunching on pine needles as she disappeared into the trees. Jack turned off every light in the house. When the knock came, it was soft, not military, not even aggressive, calculated. He opened the door. The man on the porch wore civilian clothes, but the posture gave him away. Combat boots under denim, hands smooth, eyes flat, no warmth. "You Jack Harper?" "Depends who's asking," Jack said, echoing the same words he'd said to Easton. "We're here for the girl. You know who sent us." Jack nodded slowly. "Yes," he said, "I know exactly who sent you." And then he pulled the gun. 3 seconds, 2 shots. Only one man walked away. The cabin burned before sunrise. Jack stood at the edge of the tree line, flames curling into the dawn sky like the past trying to devour itself. Everything inside, files, weapons, identities, gone. Nothing left to trace, just ash. Lena crouched nearby, her baby tucked close in the carrier, watching with wide, silent eyes. She didn't ask what happened. She didn't need to. Jack had sent a message, not to Easton, not to Rourke, to himself. No more running, no more hiding behind silence. He tossed the last of the burner phones into the fire, then turned to Lena. "Time to go," he said. They drove south through back roads, avoiding highways, fuel stops spaced wide apart. Lena kept the capsule close, hidden in the lining of the baby's blanket. Jack drove like a man with no destination, only a purpose. They stopped in small towns, with names no one remembered. In one, Lena found a pediatric clinic with an old nurse who didn't ask questions. In another, Jack bought a new blanket. Cotton this time, softer but still warm. At night, they camped under stars, the baby sleeping between them. And for the first time in years, Jack found peace in the sound of breath that wasn't his. On the 4th night, Lena handed him the capsule. "You should be the one to decide," she said. Jack weighed it in his palm. Everything Rourke needed was in it. Everything that could burn what was left of Jack's country to the ground, or fix what had long been broken. In the end, Jack didn't destroy it. He mailed it. To a journalist in DC he once trusted, a woman who still believed in truth, no matter the cost. They'd either bury it again, or it would burn the whole lie down. By the end of the week, Lena and the baby had a new name, new IDs, a small apartment in Idaho, paid 6 months in advance. Safe for now. Jack stood on the curb, duffel over his shoulder, keys in hand. "You're not staying," she said. "No," he replied. "There's still one more man out there who thinks the rules don't apply to him." Lena stepped forward. "You can't take Rourke alone." Jack gave her a soft smile. "I'm not. I'm just going to remind him who trained him." She didn't try to stop him. As he walked back to the truck, not the same one from before, this one older, louder, the baby let out a small sound, half giggle, half yawn. Jack looked back one last time, and in that tiny sound, in that fragile life wrapped in a new beginning, he found the thing he didn't know he was missing. Redemption, not for what he'd done, but for who he chose to become. Then he turned the key and disappeared back onto the road, where the fight had begun. and where, finally, he knew who he was again. If this story moved you, take a moment to subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments. Where are you watching from, and what part of Jack's journey resonated most with you? We'd love to hear your story too. You're not alone here.